Hey there, how y'all doing this fine day? There's Mr. and Mrs. dated today, coming at you from Devil's Lake State Park up in Wisconsin. We're out on a little, what'll end up being about a 2-mile walk in it on the western edge of Devil's Lake. Devil's Lake is the most popular and one of the oldest state parks in Wisconsin. It's Native Americans called it Spirit Lake. It was formed when the glaciers ran into some massive quartzite deposits. The quartzite, being 190 million years old, didn't give way. So southwest of here is what's called the driftless zone, because the glaciers couldn't really push past this point very much, but they dumped more rains at either end of this valley. You might be able to see it just a little bit on the other side there. And they chewed into the quartzite, but the quartzite held and dumped down the sides of the two parts of this valley, and then the lake was formed as the glaciers retreated. Now it's a very nice campground on all around this lake. A lot of good hiking trails. This one runs along the western edge of the lake. There's also one on the top of this ridge along this side of the lake. And there's one on the other side with some interesting rock features, like balanced rock. Quartzite is just as purple as it can be. It's very overcast today, looking, because there are some wildfires up in Canada. So the overcastness we're seeing is really smoke. So the air quality is not great. I thought I'd share some of this walk with you. We've gone on another hike of a couple of miles this morning along the Ice Age Trail, because the Ice Age Trail also runs through this park. And that part of the Ice Age Trail is actually where I did my first shakedown long distance hike before I went to the AT the first time in 2024. And Mrs. Data and I are staying in the same campground I stayed in then. This path has been partly paved over and is a little bit more accessible than the one up on the ridge line. And that's part of why we're hiking it today, because I have some news. Frequent viewers of the channel might have noticed that I haven't posted much recently. And that's because after that hike I showed y'all on Kodiak from a couple of weeks ago, I experienced a great deal of abdominal pain. I'd been having problems basically around my left hip joint for a number of months. A couple of months ago, I took an awkward step up on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania over some big rocks, and sort of did the equivalent of hyperextending my left hip joint. And caused me some pain, but I thought it was just like a little bit of a muscle pull or a strain or a cramp. So I worked it out and finished that hike. And then, as some viewers would know, since then I've come up here and hiked 100 plus miles on the Ice Age Trail. Again, I had some discomfort, but all along I thought it was something abdominal in terms of like indigestion or changing up my food choices. But in Kodiak it became clear that it wasn't. It was a groin pull or something like that. So I went to the doctor when I got back, and my doctor said that it's a hernia. So I went to a specialist, and the specialist said not only is it a hernia, it's a hernia that needs kind of immediate surgical intervention. So I'm taking an easy trail today because in about a week and a half I will go under the knife at a hospital here down there in Chicago and have that hernia repaired. And then I'll have a couple of weeks of very limited mobility and a couple of more weeks after that of only light walking and hiking. So all of that is to say the hernia operation and injury are going to take me off trail now for probably 2 months, which I'm finding very disappointing. But it is the kind of thing we deal with as hikers, and the surgeon assures me that when I'm done, I'll be fit as a fiddle in a couple of months. I don't doubt that because I had a hernia operation when I was about 10 or so. That was like 50 years ago. And so the procedure is different now. They're going to bind me up using some Gore-Tex, actually, to help hold things in place a little better. But it had held for 50 years, and I had actually almost basically forgotten I ever had that hernia when I was a kid from a bicycling accident. So anyway, that's the injury update and my health update, and there may not be a lot coming up on this channel for a couple of months since this is just a short couple of mile walk here, and I'm already feeling some discomfort as we head back, and I had to lay down after this morning's hike for about an hour, so I'm pretty lame these days for a little while. But this purple quartzite at Devil's Lake is really very nice. I mean, if you're a hiker in the Midwest and you don't have time to get down to the AT, this hike around Devil's Lake on the Ice Age Trail and through the other parts of this park is well worth a long weekend. I would say come in the middle of the week like we did because it's a very popular park. So all along Devil's Lake there are these mounds, rockfall, that are almost completely made out of purple quartzite. And then you kind of weave back in a little wooded area. You pop back out into the sunshine. The quartzite spilling down the side of the mountain reminds me of a couple of mountains I hiked by in Virginia, I think, down around Glasgow. One of them might have been called Black Rock Mountain, but it's that kind of large tumbled boulders, jagged edges. I think if they hadn't come through here and cleared a path and kind of paved a little bit of it, it would be difficult to hike through this, actually, at least for novices like myself. But the purple quartzite really is purple. I don't know how well that'll come through on the camera, but runs way up this side of that mountain. And the ridgeline path runs over a similar area like this, with views out over the other side of the lake. And there's a ridgeline path on both sides. There's only a shoreline path on the western side of the lake. The north side of the lake has a beach and a visitor center with a restaurant, and you can rent pontoon boats and kayaks, things like that. And the south edge has another public use beach and a concession stand and some shelters and covered areas that you can reserve. But today's overcast skies don't really do it justice. So this is David in the lead up there. So I'm moving kind of slowly.